Gloria Steinem once said, "The future depends entirely on what each of us does every day. A movement is only people moving." Being one of the most well-known and famous feminists in American history and possibly even the world, it's clear that Steinem lives by this quote daily, even today at age 86. I think it's important for young people like us to recognize this and know that if there are things that we want to see change in the world, we must first start with that change in ourselves. Steinem has lived her entire life fighting for what she believed to be right, no matter who disagreed. Through my research, I have learned about many moments in Steinem's life that seem to have defined who she would become, even from when she was a child. Today, so many of us refer to Gloria Steinem as a feminist icon without considering how she made it to this point. When we look at her childhood and her journey to becoming an educated woman, and not only that, but a journalist in a time that was very uncommon and even frowned upon for women to do so, it becomes clearer how she became the brilliant and inspiring woman that so many of us look up to today. Throughout both her childhood and career, Gloria Steinem experienced hardships that formed her into who she was. Steinem's upbringing was not necessarily an easy or typical one. According to the National Women's History Museum, Steinem spent her early years living the gypsy life, traveling with her parents in a house trailer, her father an on-the-road antique salesman. Her mother tutored her on the road, but Steinem did not formally attend school until she was 12 years old. Steinem later credited her childhood for her career in activism. In 1992, she told Vanity Fair, "It's difficult for a neglected child because it isn't that there's something wrong, it's that there's nothing. You experience it as a lack of reality, as invisibility. So I set about making myself real by being useful." Her parents eventually divorced when she was 10, leaving Gloria to care for her severely mentally ill mother, who struggled with depression and hallucinations. In her early teens, Gloria cared for her mother while helping support the family and attending school regularly for the very first time in her life. However, by the time she was 15 and a senior in high school, Gloria became unable to care for her mother on her own. Her father agreed to care for her mother, and Gloria moved to Washington, D.C. with her older sister while she finished school, all according to biography.com. But Steinem's collegiate and professional years are where her activism truly began, and she started to stir up controversy for the first time. Encyclopedia.com informs us that after graduating high school, Steinem received a scholarship to attend Smith College in Massachusetts, the largest women's college in the United States. Steinem entered college majoring in governmental studies, which was rather controversial at the time, especially for women. She was drawn to political activism, working for Democratic nominee Adlai Stevenson's presidential campaign in 1952. She eventually graduated from Smith, magna cum laude, high honors, in 1956 and earned the Chester Bowles Fellowship, which gave her the opportunity to travel to India for 2 years and study and research, according to encyclopedia.com. Her time abroad inspired an interest in grassroots activism, which would later translate itself in her work in the women's liberation movement and the Equal Rights Amendment. Steinem started her professional career as a journalist in New York City, writing freelance pieces for various publications. When she first began writing, she was writing for what was called the women's pages, which were lifestyle or service features about such female-centered or fashion topics such as nylon stockings. But I think it's important to note that this is not what Steinem wanted to do. In fact, she's even noted that she asked her editor before to do more political pieces, and he told her that he just didn't see her like that. But eventually she would get her opportunity to do the pieces that she wanted to. And she first gained political national attention in 1963 when Show magazine hired her to go undercover to report on the working conditions at Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club. Now, she revealed sexist, underpaid, and hard lifestyles of the waitresses, but because of this, she was unable to be taken seriously as a journalist after this, because in order to obtain the information that she needed for this expose, she had to dress in the same costume that the waitresses at the club had to wear. So many people deemed this costume as non-feminist, and they looked at her and thought, well, if you're such a feminist, how could you put yourself in something like that and allow pictures to be taken of you? But we, I think, know it's true that she wouldn't have been able to get the information that she did had she not dressed in that way. Now, in 1968, she helped found New York Magazine, where she became an editor and political writer. She was finally reporting on political campaigns and progressive social issues, including the women's liberation movement. The National Women's History Museum writes that she also joined forces with journalists Patricia Carbine and Letty Cotton Pogrebin to found Ms. Magazine. In 1971, Ms. Magazine began as an insert in New York Magazine, and by 1972, it became independent, regularly circulating as a magazine. Now, it's clear that her efforts for equality have shown through in multiple areas, but it's no doubt that Steinem's most praised displays of activism are her many pieces of written or spoken word. Gloria Steinem was the perfect person to represent the women's movement because she experienced sexism and misogyny firsthand, especially as a young, beautiful, intellectual woman working in a field that was dominated by men. Her credibility was demonstrated clearly when Steinem spoke publicly for the first time in 1969 at a Speak Out event to legalize abortion in New York State, where she shared the story of the abortion she had overseas when she was 22 years old. This sparked her feminism and engagement with the women's movement. Now, I find this to be very interesting because Steinem didn't attend this Speak Out event planning to be a speaker. She attended it planning to do a writing piece on it. And then as she was sitting there, she heard these women coming up and speaking about their own personal experiences with abortion. And she realized, hey, I had an abortion and I can relate to this. So she got up and she spoke. So I think that's very interesting that a woman that so many of us view as this amazing public speaker today started off her own career in public speaking on accident. Oftentimes, we see Gloria combine the use of ethos, pathos, and logos gracefully, and it definitely draws her audience in. And she almost does it in a way where we don't even notice it. In her testimony before Senate hearings on the Equal Rights Amendment in May of 1970, where she advocated for the addition of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, Steinem establishes her expertise by saying, "I'm currently a member of the Policy Council of the Democratic National Committee." And then her ability to relate to others comes in by saying, "And I work regularly with the lowest paid workers in the country, the migrant workers, men, women, and children both, in California and in my own state of New York." She commonly states the many ways in which she has experienced discrimination for being a woman, which lets her audience know that she's speaking from her heart and own experiences. Pathos, the emotional aspect, is another common component of Steinem's work. She uses it wisely, not only to evoke empathy or relatability, but to incite that same feeling of activism within her audience as well. Steinem often includes emotionally loaded statements in her works, choosing words that often have clear connotations or meanings. She uses pathos to relate to her audience as well, frequently establishing that she knows her privilege as a white woman and acknowledges that she will never fully understand the struggles that other women, such as women of color, may face. This makes her audience feel heard and represented, even if they know that she does not experience the same things that they do. In her testimony before Senate hearings on the Equal Rights Amendment, she says, "I've discovered that in reality, I'm very, very lucky. Most women, both wage earners and housewives, routinely suffer more humiliation and injustice than I do." In using the words humiliation and injustice, she's clearly choosing words with a strongly negative connotation. None of us want to face humiliation or injustice. She's also acknowledging her privilege. Logos, the logic side, is another extremely vital proponent to Steinem's work. She uses it often to simply state the logic of women's rights. Her approach to activism is intellectual, and she simply states the logic of feminism, which makes it hard to refute her argument. A famous quote of hers, women's liberation means men's liberation too, is a perfect example of logos. She is stating the clear logic behind the fact that if women are given more freedoms to do things like go to work, that men will have more time for their freedoms that they say they do not have time for because of work. So it's definitely true that if women have more freedoms to do the things that they want to be able to do, men will have the same time to do what they want to do as well. Steinem uses colorful language as well and several rhetorical tools in order to make her speeches great. She uses anaphora frequently, which is when a certain word or phrase is repeated at the beginning of clauses or sentences that follow each other. In her 2017 Women's March address, she exercises anaphora in repeating "we are" over and over. She says, "We are here and around the world for a deep democracy that says we will not be quiet, we will not be controlled, we will work for a world in which all countries are connected." And then she continues, "We are at one with each other. We are looking at each other, not up." And she continues, "We are linked, we are not ranked," and so on. In repeating this word "we" and "we are," she is establishing a united front in the cause. And she's also driving her point home and establishing the importance of what she's saying. Steinem also uses simile to draw comparisons between different groups. Simile is a figure of speech involving a comparison between two unlike entities using the words like or as. Again, Steinem uses this tool to compare men's experiences to women's, sexism to racism, and many other issues. Again, in her testimony before the Senate in 1970, she says, "Gunnar Myrdal noted 30 years ago the parallel between women and Negroes in this country. Both suffered from such restricting social myths as smaller brains, passive natures, inability to govern themselves, and certainly not white men, sex objects only, childlike natures, special skills, and the like. When evaluating a general statement about women, it might be valuable to substitute black people for women just to test the prejudice at work." Steinem's work and delivery style can be characterized as a combination of class, composure, and wit. She often exercises feminist humor. In something she wrote that was titled "If Men Could Menstruate," which the title in itself has wit, Steinem achieves her goal of pinpointing the difference in issues that men and women face while jokingly referring back to the idea of if men could menstruate, what they would do. She has also referred to Dr. Sigmund Freud as the great 19th century perpetuator of female inferiority. She's attributed to the quote, "The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off." Now, all of these statements, although rather logical, they definitely contain an element of wit. And these elements of wit not only draw her audience in closer because humor is something that interests people, but it also makes them feel more at her level and more at a friendly level than at a speaker audience level. Because when someone is using such humor, it kind of brings everyone together in the laugh. Now, although she uses this witty humor, she does it to a point that still remains graceful and composed and classy. Although many people think Steinem represents a rogue woman, there are many of us who believe in the cause and think that she embodies the epitome of class under pressure. Steinem enhances her powerful rhetoric with her graceful delivery, always remaining composed while delivering words full of force and fury. She perfectly combines classy and composed delivery with direct and strong language, portraying the image of a strong, unapologetic, brilliant woman. Gloria Steinem has repeatedly been referred to as the world's most famous feminist, and for good reason. Her legacy is certainly one that will go down in history. Steinem's life has been dedicated to the cause of women's rights. She has led marches and toured the country as an in-demand speaker. Britannica states that in 1972, she and other feminists formed the National Women's Political Caucus, which continues to support gender equality and ensure the election of more pro-equality women to public office. She has also co-founded several other organizations throughout her career, such as the Women's Actions Alliance in 1971, which promotes non-sexist, multiracial children's education, the Women's Media Center in 2004 to promote positive images of women in the media, Voters for Choice in 1977, a pro-choice political action committee, as well as the Ms. Foundation for Women. And in the 1990s, Steinem helped establish the Take Our Daughters to Work Day, which was the first national effort to empower young girls to explore career opportunities. Even today, at 86 years old, Gloria Steinem still remains an important face in the women's rights movement, continuing to write and speak at events, as well as have her life portrayed on film. She has won several awards and honors for her work as an activist and writer. The National Women's History Museum states that in 2013, President Barack Obama presented her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor. In 2017, Rutgers University created the Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair in Media, Culture, and Feminist Studies. Now, Gloria is still active in her endeavors, and she is still being invited to speak at events and work on projects. She remains a frequent editor for Ms. Magazine, and she was invited to participate as a keynote speaker at the Women's March that took place in Washington, D.C. in 2017. Additionally, according to Oprah Magazine, in only the past 2 years, she has had her life dramatized 3 times. First on stage in New York in Gloria, A Life, then on television in FX's Mrs. America, and finally in the director Julie Taynor's upcoming decade-spanning film, The Glorias. Now, it is no doubt that Gloria Steinem has lived her entire life fighting for what she felt was right. Even from an early age, Steinem disregarded what was right for a woman to do and followed the path that she wanted to pursue. Her less-than-typical life led her to become one of the most iconic feminists of all time. Gloria has proven to so many women that regardless of their background, they can make their voices heard if they speak loud enough. We should all try to lead our lives a little more like her, fearlessly, boldly, and unapologetically. In Steinem's biography, My Life on the Road, she includes a touching dedication to the doctor who helped her find access to an abortion as a young woman. She writes, he said, "You must promise me 2 things. First, you will not tell anyone my name. Second, you will do what you want with your life. Dear Dr. Sharp, I believe you, who knew that the law was unjust, would not mind if I say this so long after your death. I've done the best that I could with my life. This book is for you." Now, in that, I think we can all agree that Gloria Steinem has certainly done the very best that she could with her life, and she will continue to be an inspiration to myself and so many others in the present and in years to come. Thank you.